Many files have a special background layer. Let's take a look at what a background layer is and how to work with it. If you're following along, use this file from the practice files for this tutorial. Let's take a look at the Layers panel, where at the bottom of this layer stack, there's a layer labeled Background with an uppercase B and a lock symbol. That's how to recognize a special background layer. The content of this background layer is the large photo in the background of the image in the document window. A background layer like this has special properties that are different than a regular layer. For example, you can't change the stacking order of a background layer in the Layers panel. Try to move it up in the layer stack by selecting the background layer and then dragging up. And you just can't drop it on top of these other layers. Instead, you get this no way symbol. And when you remove your finger from the mouse or the trackpad, the background layer pops back down to the bottom of the layer stack. Similarly, you can't drag another layer beneath the background layer in the Layers panel. Try selecting another layer and then drag beneath the background layer and you get that same no way symbol. A background layer just has to be at the bottom of the layer stack, and its content has to be at the back of the image behind the other image elements. Let's go back to the Layers panel and select the background layer again to see something else that you can't do with the background layer, and that is to move it with the Move tool. I'll go over and select the Move tool in the Tools panel. I'll click on that large background photo and I'll try to move, and I just get a message that the Move tool can't move this layer because the layer is locked. I'll click OK to dismiss that. There are a couple other things you can't do with a background layer either. For example, you can't vary the opacity of a layer, and you can't have transparent pixels on a background layer. So what if you want to do any of that with a special background layer? In that case, you need to convert the background layer to a regular layer, and that's as simple as one click. Just come down to the background layer and click on the lock symbol, and it goes away, and that layer becomes a regular layer called Layer 0. And now, because it's a regular layer, I could do all the things I just mentioned that you can't do with a background layer. As just one example, I can move this layer with the Move tool. I have the Move tool still selected. I'll move into the image and I'll drag to the right, and that does move Layer 0, and it reveals transparency behind it because this is the bottommost layer in the layer stack. Now, what if you did want to have a special background layer and you didn't have one in your file? Well, you can make any layer into a special background layer by going up to the Layer menu and choosing New, Background from Layer. I actually want to make a new layer in this case and make that the background layer. So I'll go down to the bottom of the Layers panel and I'll click the Create New Layer button. That makes a new Layer 1, which I'll drag to the bottom of the layer stack. Layer 1 is currently empty. I'll fill it with white. To do that, I'm going to go up to the Edit menu and I'll choose Fill. In the Fill dialog that opens, I'll change the first drop-down menu to white and I'll click OK. And now we have a white layer at the bottom of the layer stack. To change that into a special background layer, I'll go up to the Layer menu and choose New, Background from Layer. And now that layer is locked. I can't move it or do the other things that I mentioned. And it's providing a stable base for this composition. So background layers deserve mention because you will run into one sooner rather than later. And now you know what a background layer is, what its limitations are, and how to work with it. If you're comfortable applying adjustments directly to an image, you may want to take things a step further by applying similar adjustments in a more flexible way, as adjustment layers. You can use this image from the practice files for this tutorial to follow along. Over in the Layers panel, make sure you have the layer selected above which you want your adjustment layer, keeping in mind that an adjustment layer will affect all layers beneath it by default. I've selected the top layer here, which contains this small photo of a bouquet. Now let's add an adjustment layer. One way to do that is to go to the bottom of the Layers panel and click this icon, the one that looks like a half-black, half-white circle. The menu that pops up contains many of the same adjustments that you can apply as a direct adjustment from the Image menu at the top of the screen. But applying them from here as adjustment layers gives you more editing flexibility and protects your original photo from direct changes. I'm going to choose the black and white adjustment layer. That did two things. It automatically created a new layer in the Layers panel above the selected layer, and it opened the Properties panel. The layer that was created is a special kind of layer called an adjustment layer. It doesn't have any image content of its own. Instead, it applies its adjustments to content on the layers below it. So in this case, the content of all layers below this adjustment layer is now black and white in the image. In the Properties panel that opened, you'll find the controls for the adjustment layer. The controls change depending on what kind of adjustment layer is selected at the moment. For a black and white adjustment, you can use these controls to customize the color to black and white conversion. Each of these sliders will lighten or darken areas in the black and white that were a particular color in the color version. For example, to make everything that was yellow in the color image brighter in the black and white, drag the yellows slider to the right. And to make everything that was green in the color image darker in the black and white, drag the green slider to the left. When you're happy with the way things look in the image, close the Properties panel by clicking the double-pointed arrow at the top right. The good news about an adjustment layer is that you can access those controls again anytime and make more changes. To do that, just make sure that the black and white adjustment layer is selected in the Layers panel and click the Properties panel icon again. If you don't see that icon in this collapsed panel, go up to the window menu at the top of the screen and select Properties from there. You could just drag more sliders again, or if you're not sure which of the color range sliders corresponds to which part of the black and white image, let Photoshop figure that out for you by activating this targeting tool and then clicking on something in the image that you want to lighten or darken, like this flower. Drag to the left to darken or to the right to lighten. Keep in mind that when you do that, you're changing not only the brightness of the object you clicked on, the flower, you're also changing everything that was the same color in the color version of the image. To close the Properties panel, click the double-pointed arrows. Now, an adjustment layer affects everything beneath it in the Layers panel. So you can control what's affected by changing the stacking order of the adjustment layer in the Layers panel. For example, with the adjustment layer selected, click, hold, and drag it beneath the small bouquet layer. And now the small bouquet layer isn't affected by the black and white adjustment, and the small bouquet photo remains in color. When you save an image that has adjustment layers, open the Save As dialog box. Make sure that Layers is checked, and double-check that you're saving in the Photoshop or PSD format. That's important because the Photoshop format retains layers, so your adjustment layers will be there for further editing the next time you open the image, and that isn't true if you save only in the JPEG format. So that's an introduction to adjustment layers. The most important points to remember for now are that using adjustment layers will protect your original images from direct changes and will help you to maximize your editing flexibility. Adjusting the intensity of color in a photograph can have a big impact. In this video, we'll explore how to do that with a Vibrance adjustment. You can follow along with this image from the practice files for this tutorial. First, whenever you're applying a direct adjustment to an image, you want to make sure that you have the layer selected that contains the image. Here, we just have a single layer in this photograph, so it's not a problem. But if you have a multi-layer image, then you should check the Layers panel first. Now, let's say that we want to make the color of this weaver's sweater richer or more intense. But we don't want her skin to look too saturated. That's a perfect job for a Vibrance adjustment. To apply a Vibrance adjustment, I'll go up to the Image menu, choose Adjustments, and here there are two kinds of adjustments that would affect color intensity. There's Vibrance and there's Hue Saturation. When skin color is involved, or when you need a subtle enhancement to color intensity, then Vibrance is the best choice. We'll cover hue saturation and talk about when it's most useful in another video in this tutorial. I'll select Vibrance here, and that opens the Vibrance dialog box. In this dialog box, you have two choices, saturation or Vibrance. You can use them singly or you can use them together. Let's see what they do. If I drag the saturation slider over to the right, you'll see right away that the intensity of all the colors is ramped up. Not only does the weaver's sweater become a richer, more intense purple, but the intensity of the flesh tones and of the loom increases too. And it really is too strong an effect in this photo. So I'm going to put saturation back to 0. I'll just type 0 in its value field. Instead, let's try dragging the Vibrance slider to the right. Vibrance does a more subtle job of intensifying color, and it protects the flesh tones from oversaturation. Let's compare a before and after view by clicking the checkbox to the left of Preview. That's how the image looked without the Vibrance adjustment. And here's how it looks with the Vibrance adjustment. We've managed to make the sweater a stronger purple without overdoing the subject's face and the color of the wood. If you're happy with the result, click OK and go to the File menu, choose Save As, and I suggest that you change the file name so you don't save over the original photo with this adjusted version. So that's how to subtly increase color intensity by applying a Vibrance adjustment. We applied this adjustment directly to the photo, but it could be applied as a flexible adjustment layer. That's a topic we'll cover in another video in this tutorial.